Welcome to the 105th annual meeting of the California Avocado Society, known as CAS, not to be confused with CAC, the California Avocado Commission. They're the ones that take a tiny amount of money out of your fruit check and have developed the best fruit marketing program in the United States. CAC works closely with CAS to develop our educational seminars throughout the year. CAS is the horticultural organization with an all-volunteer board of directors. We gather and disseminate information about avocados to both our members and the world. You know, it's hard to think up new things when your society's over 100 years old. Face it, this is the society's second pandemic. So the board's been trying to think up some new things. The annual meeting is one of them. This is the first time that we've given our guests a free meeting. The cost has been covered by donations of our generous sponsors. In our first pre-recorded video, you'll hear about our 4 foundation sponsors that sponsor everything we do. You're not sure what the society does? Well, members get a weekly newsline that covers the day's market. Sponsors on the left side of the front page of this newsline. Then we have quarterly educational meetings. This covers everything from irrigation to new government regulations. You can be a sponsor for this, and you can sponsor one meeting or all 4. Those of you that are members received our third quarter yearbook this week. Make sure to look at the display ads and thank those vendors for sponsoring our yearbook. And now I'm going to tell you who helped us pay for the professional videographer and our Zoom facilitator today. Today's sponsors are Agrex, AGQ Labs USA, American Ag Credit, Brocon Nursery, Calavo Growers, Delray Avocado, Aerometer Water Management, Farm Credit West, Fruit Growers Lab, Golden Pacific Crop Insurance, Grangetto Farm Supply, Henry Avocado, Index Fresh, McDaniel Avocado, Mission Produce, Nutrient Ag Solutions, San Diego Agricultural Laboratory, Sierra Pacific Farm Management, Westphalia, and Westpac Avocado. Thank you, sponsors, for making this meeting possible today. Normally, during our lunch, we have our annual business meeting, and we introduce our board of directors. So again, we're trying something new this year. We want you to go to our website, CaliforniaAvocadoSociety.org. You remember how I told you how well the California Avocado Commission markets? Well, CAC is so good at marketing. The other day, I Googled California Avocado Society and CAC's website came up. So whenever you're trying to get to our website, make sure that the last 3 letters are .org. Once you're on the website, you'll see a list of directors along with our contact information. If you've got questions, please contact us and we'll try to answer them as well as possible. Also, while on the website, you'll be able to buy membership or inquire about sponsorship. We want you to become very familiar with this website because this is the tool we're going to be using for all new things that we're doing. As you know, we have a new yearbook this year that's in a quarterly format. We heard members complain that they wanted hard copies. We heard you. So now in December, you'll be able to go to the website and buy a hard copy to add to your collection. All 4 quarters in one published book. Another thing that's new for CAS is that we're in the travel business. You know, we publish these articles in the yearbook about all the cool things avocado growers are doing around the world. Now we're taking you there. Our last trip was to Uruapan, Mexico. Our next trip was scheduled for next month in South Africa. Obviously, it was put on hold because of the pandemic. And once it's over, we're planning to go there. We also have trips planned to Brazil and planning to go to the World Avocado Conference in New Zealand. The history of CAS is rich. The future is bright. If you remember, thank you. If not, join today. Remember, It's the website with the .org on the end. I just want to let you know we have a great program planned for today. We pre-recorded a thank you for our foundation sponsors. Then we have a talk about evapotranspiration and irrigation scheduling using the newest, latest technology. After that, Dr. Ben Faber is going to be our moderator, and he's going to answer questions and answers. If this is one of your first Zoom meetings, you'll see somewhere on your screen, it says Q&A. Click on that, type in the question, and Ben's gonna pick 2 or 3 after each lecture, and then all the questions that are not answered, we'll try to get to after the seminar, just to try to keep this in our 90-minute time zone. After we're finished talking about irrigation scheduling, we're gonna give the award of honor. And then we're gonna review a high-density avocado grove that was toured by the Avocado Society a few years ago. Now you can see some things have changed, and we're gonna talk about some pruning ideas. Once again, we're gonna have a short question and answer after that. Once we're finished with that, we're gonna jump into video put on by a PCA that's been monitoring the avocado lace bug. This bug's been around for years. I didn't think it was gonna be a problem. I was wrong. This year, it was a big problem for a number of growers in our area. We're gonna tell you what we know and what we're trying to figure out. Once again, that'll be followed by a short question and answer. Then we have the award of honor presentation. Once the award of honor presentation is finished, we're gonna once again open it up to all questions, and all board members will be available to answer what we can. I've been told that we have a number of people that logged on from around the world. I wanna welcome you. We're happy you're here. And with that, Peter, on with the show.
Hello. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Leo McGuire, and I'm president of the California Avocado Society for this year. I want to thank you for sitting in on our meeting. And today what I want to talk about quickly is the Avocado Society is a 105-year-old group. And you don't have an association last that long if you don't have people that are passionate about the group. The board of directors works for free. We only have 2 employees that basically work for low wages, but they work very hard. And I want to thank our sponsors for making it possible that we can put on these meetings for our growers. We have people that sponsor our seminars. We'll talk about those during this. We have people that sponsor the annual meeting. Thank you for making this possible. We have sponsors that sponsor our newsletter, and we also have sponsors for our quarterlies that come together into our annual yearbook. I want to thank all of the sponsors, but right now I want to take time to point out 4 sponsors. These 4 sponsors have sponsored everything. They pay for all the seminars, all of the newsletters, all the field days. They buy into everything, and if it wasn't for these foundation sponsors, we wouldn't have been able to have the meetings that we did this year during this pandemic. So in order to make an example of these sponsors, I've decided to dig into my hat collection. Those of you that know me know I love hats, and my wife always wonders why I've got so many, but now you'll know why. In alphabetical order, I'd like to first thank American Ag Credit. American Ag Credit makes it very easy for farmers to get financing. American Ag Credit, thank you for being a sponsor. Next, for all full disclosure, I work for Calavo Growers, so they are a sponsor. I picked this hat out. I've got a number of them. This is a classic 2-tone with braids, and something you don't see anymore is a brown band. Calavo's a great company to work for, and we take really good care of our growers. Another sponsor, the only one that is older than the Avocado Society, is Index Fresh. I believe they're a year older than the Society, so they've been with us since the beginning. Index Fresh, thank you for being a sponsor, foundation sponsor, help us to put together these meetings. Great group of people. I've got a lot of friends that work there. And the last, I also have a large number of mission hats. I chose the classic sand hat. It was a time when all their vehicles were this color. Mission's an excellent organization. Again, I have friends that work there, and I really want to thank you for sponsoring the California Avocado Society. At the end of this meeting, there will be a page that shows how to get onto our website, or just Google California Avocado Society. If you would like your organization to have their hat worn before all growers around the world, please sponsor the California Avocado Society. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Lance Andersen. I'm one of the board members of the California Avocado Society, and I'm also the Ag Program Director at Mission Resource Conservation District. And I work here in San Diego County with growers in irrigation management, helping them first with an irrigation evaluation to determine uniformity of their irrigation systems, and then moving beyond that into irrigation water management and irrigation scheduling. Today with us we have John Burr, who's an avocado grower here in Escondido. John, can you tell us a little bit how you got into avocados?
Yeah, we bought a home with avocados, and then we've continued to expand. We now have 3 groves, and I love the business. It's an exciting crop to farm, Lance, and it has its challenges. I've worked with a lot of crops in the country, and I think it's probably one of the most challenging agronomically of all the crops, and mainly because of its water demands. So
the irrigation is the primary concern, I think, of most avocado growers. And so today we want to talk a little bit about evapotranspiration and how we use the data that we get from the California Irrigation Management Information System to determine how much water do we need to apply to our grove. John, I know you've been through quite an evolution as you've become an avocado grower, gaining understanding of your soils through soil sensors and different technologies, the old soil probe as well, and all the way now to where basically you're just using ET, aren't you?
I'm simply using ET. We calculate it every Sunday. We use the spatial ET, the satellite-derived, I call it the satellite-derived evapotranspiration. We get that on Sunday morning, and we run our calculations in our spreadsheets, and that tells us what our setting should be for irrigating for the next week. And it's exciting. Sometimes we find we have changes of 10, 15, 20% per week. And all that adds up to using water correctly for a couple of reasons. Too much water and you're leaching fertilizer, or you're getting into root rot, Phytophthora, and too little, you don't have a productive growth. And through time, like you say, we've titrated it with soil sensors and tubes, and now we're using the Phytech sensor in the tree, and where it's measuring the expansion contraction of the trunk, and we feel like we almost now totally are using our calculated run times for the week, how long to run the sprinklers. So,
all right. So we get this data, as John said, he gets it on Sunday. You can, if you set up with Simis, you can get it on a daily basis or a weekly basis.
Yes.
And normally we do look at a time frame of about 7 days.
Yeah, it's emailed.
That emails to you. You put in either the Latin long of your property or the address in the website, and that then they're able to send you the data. They're currently using a GO satellite with a 0.5 kilometer resolution, which is greatly improved over the 2 kilometer that they were using about 3 or 4 years ago. So the data is really proving to be very useful.
Very accurate, yeah. In fact, when they first started with it, it was, we would go to the Simis stations, and depending upon what the weather was in different stations, you extrapolate from that. But through time, the spatial Simis has become very accurate, and so we do very little. The other one we use the ETO based on what they call FRET. Going forward, we take a look at that as well as part of our calculation. We use the spatial Simis and the FRET, and that's where they're applying the algorithms to the forecast. And what's handy there, Lance, is you can see when you jumped up to 0.6 inches per day that, you've got a Santa Ana coming. And sure enough, you start looking in, it measures wind and whatnot. And so it's helped us to get ready for hot spells or wind events that cause a tremendous increase in evapotranspiration.
Yeah, and that FRET data, you can find that on the NOAA, the National Weather Station or Weather System website. They have Southern California FRET data there. So we get on Sunday this ET number, and that number is in inches per acre, which doesn't really correlate to our sprinkler output. We measure our sprinkler output in gallons per hour. So we need to do a little bit of math to take that ETO number and make it something that's usable for us in the grove. The first thing that we've got to do is the university has done the research. If you understand the ET calculation, it's a raw number based on how much evapotranspiration there is in a well-watered pasture grass of about 6 to 8 inches of height. And then the university has done these calculations to come up with a crop coefficient for virtually every crop in the state of California, avocados being one of them. Our crop coefficient for California, or for avocados here, it's simple. It's a set 0.86 throughout the year. In other crops, that coefficient changes with the seasons, but the research has shown that 0.86 is our crop coefficient in California. So we take this raw data that comes to you in that email. It'll be 1.25 inches, and we multiply that by the 0.86, which gives us a raw number, a crop ET, still in inches, that then we can convert to gallons per hour, and we can convert that by multiplying it by 0.62, or we can go the long way and multiply it by 27,152, which is how many gallons of water there are in an acre inch of water. And then then we'd have to take that and multiply it by your number of trees per acre. If you're 20 by 20, it's 109. If you're 15 by 20, 145. And then if you're high density, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But the important thing is when we run all those numbers, we end up with whatever our time frame is. And like I said, we usually look at 7 days. It'll tell us how many gallons of water a tree has used for that time frame.
7 days.
7 days, yeah. And John, I know you talk about a tree of one. Can you explain what you mean by a tree of one?
Yeah, you can set this all up in a spreadsheet, inches, and then, get the calculation out for gallons. But, you need to adjust it for the size of the tree.
Right.
And we don't have, like he says, what is the standard tree for us to measure and to use as a reference. And so, I do my swag, and whether you need a component in there for the size of the tree, whether it's 0.25 of a big tree or 1, or whether it's 0.15, and so we work with that. And that's also important if you're doing fertigation. I mean, you need to have an understanding of in order to apply the right amount of fertilizer to a tree as well.
When you're thinking about a tree of one, are you just looking at canopy diameter, or are you also looking at tree height?
That would be like, to me, it's like a 20-foot tree with a full canopy.
Full canopy, say 18
right.
feet wide in a 20 by 20.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so if it's bigger than that, then you would go a little higher measure.
Right.
And you could do that by increasing the case of C, or by putting the percentage into your formula for what size tree is. It'd be 1.10, 10% bigger tree than a tree of one. Or so anyway, that's an important part of your calculation in determining what the runtime is.
Yeah. So if we have an 18-foot canopy and 20 feet of height is one, a 9-foot wide tree that's about 10 feet tall would be a 0.5 tree.
It'd be a 0.5.
You know, so we kind of, we play with those numbers.
And a newly planted tree is, I always call that 0.05.
0.05.
So, and that calculates through what the runtime would be for that. On the very young trees, we tend to tube. It's difficult to use ET in that. But when they start getting more than 2 or 3 years old, we start going to ET. So, or a calculation. So so right now we don't soil tube. We pretty much have developed or evolved a system where we're using the weekly ET calculation to determine what our run times are going to be for the week.
Yeah, and then based on, as you come to understand your soils in the different zones in the groves,
which
you determine your frequency of run.
Right, you do your mapping. If you have very low soil moisture holding capacity, that's another step is how often do you irrigate. In some cases we're irrigating 3 times a week, in other cases 2 times a week, and then if we're into heavier soil we're irrigating once a week. So we've really designed and tailored this in to meet the needs of the grove. So that's where your electrical conductivity mapping comes in, where you can tell a grower exactly what the soil type is, and then he can tailor. If it's a Sanabi, it has 0.6 of an inch of holding capacity in the upper foot. You go through that with a Santa Ana and one Santa Ana, and so but usually we're getting that 3 times a week.
3 times a week,
2 to 3, yeah.
So things, there's a lot of factors, but primarily what we're showing is, oftentimes they used to say irrigation was an art. Really, we've been able to turn it more into a science. There's still some nuances to it, of course, but we've got data that can drive our information that provides 2 things. 1, better production out of our trees, and 2, potential water savings in those times of year where we find that every 7 days isn't needed.
Yeah, our payback out there is, we're irrigating every week, except after we've had rain in the winter months and then we back off and we're just wet, But the payback comes, and particularly the tail end of the beginning and the end of the irrigation season. Like right now, here we are, September 23rd? Is that or 24th?
23rd.
23rd. So, the days now compared to June are 2 hours, 3 hours shorter.
Oh, at least, yeah.
So a lot of this component in calculating the ETO is radiation. And so, that's 80% of the evaporation transpiration formula. So what we find is our big water savings is when 1 week in the spring it'll be cool, the next week it'll be warm. So, we sometimes can save 20-30% between those weeks compared to being on a calendar or kind of second guessing it by what soil moisture is.
Yeah, I know. I always joke when I was a kid and my grandparents were irrigating, basically it's Tuesday, we turn on the water.
Right.
And you turned it on in the morning and you turned it off when it was probably time for dinner.
Yeah.
Not a lot of calculation.
Or some people turn it on and run it for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Whether it's springtime or,
Of course, the price of water was very different back then.
It is, yeah. So
was the price of avocados.
But it's a very effective tool. And I would suggest that people just don't run into it, but barge in. You need to get your spreadsheet set up and begin to work with your grove and your soil types and bring it on over a period of time. But we've saved a lot of money, and we're running one of the real marks is we're running very low chlorides in our tissues, and I think a lot of that's because if you do hit your K sub C 0.86 and you're moving the moisture, the water through the profile, and salts, that you keep your chloride toxicity uptake to a minimum. So too much water, you're stacking chloride,
So,
and not enough, you're not moving it through. You're building it up in your profile. So, but if you do meet, that's one thing we find, if you do meet evapotranspiration at 1x, you're moving it through. This actually came out of the soil salinity lab, a special team between them and the University of California, Riverside. And we have taken a hard look at that, and it works. You don't need a lot of excess leaching. In fact, with a lot of excess leaching, you're stacking chloride. So I know that would make a lot of growers nervous, but
yeah, and our goal isn't to complicate growers' lives, but to provide tools that make for better irrigation management. And we'll have on the Avocado Society website some links to assistance in this, as well as some of these data tools that you can utilize.
It's interesting, Lance. Some things can affect it. I think the smoke played into a lot of our ETO calculations. That's one of the few times that I think ETO has been off, is that the smoke kind of said, well, you got clouds. The GOES satellite thought maybe we had clouds here. And this is one of the few times I've been in disagreement with the spatial ETO reading for a week. And that the trees are using a lot more water. Of course, coming off those 2 back-to-back days of 115 degrees, we don't use ETO for that. We just get out there and run a lot of water.
Yeah, there are times where the weather tells us just turn them on and forget about that they're on.
Right. You pulse it. Make sure you get
the water around the grove.
So.
All right. Thank you, John.
My pleasure, Lance.
Okay, so we're going to transition to the next presentation. And here is a question. The most important activity out there that we do is irrigation. And we talk about fertilization all the time. Actually, when you're irrigating, you're dealing with toxicities, how to manage toxicities. Every time you irrigate, you're putting chlorides, sodium, total salinity on. And every time you irrigate, you have to be aware of how to manage those toxicities. And we're often confused by how much water to put on. And the best thing to do is to go out there and dig a hole and see what's going on. But the drivers for water use in plants are not the same as they are in human beings. It was mentioned in the presentation that sunlight, the day length, how many clouds, how much overcast you have is the driving factor. So, January is going to be different from June just because of day length. And then the most important factor after that is wind. Wind dries things out. And the combination of day length and wind is really the most important factor. The least important factor is temperature. So, we talk about 120 degrees. Yeah, that has an effect. And oftentimes it shuts trees down to stop them from transpiring, which is one reason why we get heat damage. So we're going to transition now into the next presentation video. This is an award of honor that's being presented to John Burr by Leo McGuire. So Peter, take it.
The highest award that the California Avocado Society gives is the Award of Honor. John Burr has won this year's Award of Honor, and he's brought a great background to the avocado industry. Let's start way back with his grandparents had a nursery in San Fernando Valley, so he knows about citrus. Then his parents moved to Lindsay, California, where not only did they have citrus, but they also had olives. Then he went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and ended up working for Ciba-Geigy. You probably know him today as Novartis. Here, John learned about enzymes, and these enzymes he used to improve the color of wine. So he's worked with grapes. He left Geigy for a Danish enzyme company called Novo. Here he worked to improve corn syrup, corn for crops. While at Novo, he convinced the brewers in Golden, Colorado that the enzyme could digest sugar without affecting flavor. John, I want to personally thank you for Coors Light.
You're welcome, Leo.
John went on to being a founding member of AgriQuest.
I designed it with you in mind.
Yeah, well, heaven only knows. A founding board member of AgriQuest. They developed a biological, pesticide, organic, fungicide, crop protectant, and that is labeled for avocados. It's called Serenade. I could spend the next 10 minutes talking about you and Precision Farming Incorporated. Everything from GPS farming to satellite sensors to irrigation. As you've showed with your grove, you love technology and you like to apply it. You're all wondering what this has to do with avocados. Well, we're fortunate that in 2001, John moved to San Diego County to be CEO of Innovase. Right. This is another cutting-edge enzyme company. When he retired from this position, he purchased the historic Wiley Adobe. It came with an avocado grove. As you see, John knows all about irrigation and really enjoys renovating groves. Once he was finished with his home grove, he bought another grove down the street. And then he bought another grove down the street. John knows that water is the most important input for San Diego County. He worked with a local group of growers to convince the city of Escondido to build a plant to recycle water. This plant will soon produce high-quality irrigation water at a reasonable price for the growers throughout San Pasqual Valley. John likes using technology, and he likes developing better irrigation and pruning techniques. He's worked with high-density and low-density avocado groves. He served on the CAC board as an essential member of the Production Research Committee. How many years you been on the committee now?
It's going on about eight or 9 years.
8 or 9 years. We have an agenda. John reads information and sends us reading material before every meeting. It's fantastic. He also works very hard for the San Diego County Irrigated Lands Group. He is currently the chairman of that group, and because of all of his hard work for the San Diego County Farm Bureau, they gave him Farmer of the Year for 2018. It's my privilege to give John Burr the Award of Honor for Outstanding Service to the California Avocado Society.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor.
And John, this group also has a pin that has your initials engraved in it, and you can wear that on your lapel for our next Avocado Society trip.
I will wear that with pride. Which I was. We had a great trip to Mexico.
That was great.
Yeah, I hope they have that again. So, but thank you very much. This is a deep honor and total surprise. And so, anyway, this is one of the greater honors in my career. So,
well, that's saying quite a bit, John.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, be sure to keep drinking light beer.
And the terminology that Lance Andersen was using was a little confusing. Well, it's basically when you're doing irrigation scheduling using SIMUS, it's figuring out how to run your bank account. If you can't run your checking account, you're gonna have problems with SIMUS. But it's, once you learn how to do it, it's a fairly simple operation. The information that was shared between John Burr and Lance Andersen is going to be summarized in a much more readable format on the Avocado Society website, where these presentations will also be posted. It'll take probably a week for that to happen, but tune into the cas.org website and you'll be able to see it. My bias really is towards irrigation. If you can get irrigation right, you're going to have a healthy tree, and that's really what we're looking at. And if you're using SIMUS, you may end up using more water, you may end up using less water, but you should be using water according to the needs of the tree. And that is the critical issue here. We are putting water on according to the needs of our labor, according to the needs of when water is available. It's it's not when the tree needs it. And a healthy tree is a tree that's going to be a very productive tree. And we're working with salinity management all the time. Every time you irrigate, you should be aware of stacking chlorides, making sure that you're moving chlorides and salinity through the root zone so that it doesn't accumulate in that root zone so that the tree will take it up. We have very few diseases in avocado. Phytophthora root rot is one of them. It's directly linked to how water is managed. And then we have all these other things like Botrospharia and black streak and bacterial canker. these are some of the few diseases actually that we have in avocado, and they all are directly related to water management and salinity management. If you can get water right, then you can start thinking about fertilizing right. But until you get the water right, you can't fertilize right. And all too often we emphasize fertilizing over irrigation. And you know, we try and buy materials in order to make our groves better, but really it's using the water that we've got more effectively that is going to make a healthier tree, and a tree that is able to take up nutrients that are already in our soils. Typically, you know, California soils are rich in nutrients, and that's why we have toxicities. We've got so much nutrients in our soils, we're managing the salinity that exists in these soils. You know, so many other places in the world are high rainfall and all the nutrients have been leached. And so they have to apply fertilizers to get those into the tree because they're not in the soil. The rain has leached it out. Well, it does not rain here, if you noticed. And as a result, the natural inherent fertility of our soils is there, and it's present as salts. And so we have to manage those. So with our next speaker, Gary Bender, he's going to be talking about high density plantings and some pruning. And I'm thinking that Peter has got this loaded and ready to roll.
Good morning. I'm Gary Bender. I'm an emeritus farm advisor with the University of California Cooperative Extension in San Diego County, and we're going to be talking about our high density grove today. Behind me here we have a small avocado planting here. It's this Hass avocado on Dusa rootstock. We chose Dusa because it's currently our best rootstock for resistance to Phytophthora root rot. And this ranch has Phytophthora on the ranch, so we didn't want to have it spread into our grove here. So this is a high density. We're trying out on 10 by 10 spacing. We're trying to keep them about 8 feet high. And Hass does not want to grow like that, so it's a constant pruning and touch-up pruning to keep these trees in their shape. We'd like to have a look like a fat Christmas tree shape, where we have leaves all the way down to almost to the soil, and we'd like to keep a space in between the trees. Now behind me, we did not prune last year. I wanted to show you what a non-pruned grove eventually looks like. It gets very crowded and they're pretty high. They need to be brought down again, and we are in the process of picking the fruit right now, and when that gets done we hope to prune immediately, because it's right now it's in March, and they'll still have flowering in April. We'll get fruit set after we harvest. Okay, so next we're going to look at the trial. This was a pruning trial, and we'll show that to you coming up next. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the pruning trial. It's a pruning set up as a pruning trial to compare an all-around pruning. We're topping at 7 feet. They quickly grow back up to 8 feet, but that's the range we're trying to keep them in. And we're comparing to the all sides prune to the, over here in the white, we're doing alternate side pruning. We started off pruning in the third year on the southwest side, next year on the northeast side, back to the southwest side, and then the following year on the northeast side. So we went back and forth and back and forth. And the reason for that is to preserve as much fruiting wood on the side of the tree as possible and still keep the tree pruned. As it turned out, when we compared the yield between the two styles at the end of the trial, they're almost exactly the same amount of yield. We did save some labor in pruning on the alternate side, but it wasn't much difference between the two styles. Now on the white here, this is, you can see we have a Zutano in the middle of 8 Hass trees. So these are 9 tree units spread throughout this trial. And we have quite a few bees over here, and they'll come in, and in the morning the Hass flowers will be female, and the Zutano flowers, which is a bee flower type tree, will be male. So all the bee has to do is hit a flower on the Zutano, bounce over to the house flower, and then of course they bounce around to several house flowers, and hopefully those flowers will be pollinated, but they have the best chance to be pollinated. And we have the same thing over here in this style, 9 tree units with a Zutano in the middle. Now if we look over to this side, this is the lamb hass side. We were comparing hass to lamb hass, and it's set up in the same method. We were comparing 2 styles of pruning. We were hoping to get better yield on the lamb hass, and of course that is a little bit later fruit. That'll be harvested in May, June, July, August. So it's a summer fruit, and if you harvest earlier than that, it'll be kind of rubbery and it will not be edible. Okay, now we're going to look at our yield through the years on our high density trial here compared to the California average yield. This is in 2015. This is they were planted in 2012, in August of 2012, so this will be pretty much our first harvest. We got a little over 13,000 pounds per acre on our trial of hass. We measured the Zutanos, but it's not presented in this chart here. And then we have over here the next year 25,000 pounds per acre. In 2017 we were back down to 5,100 pounds, but the whole state was in an off year, and we were also in an off year because of alternate bearing problems, it looked like. But there was a lot of heat in California that caused this damage here. And then in 2018 back up to a little over 21,000 pounds per acre. During that 4-year period we averaged 16,000 pounds per acre on our high density, and we were doing pretty darn good. I'm not presenting the lamb hass data here, but we averaged about 11,000 pounds per acre on the lamb hass side of the trial. So we're very hopeful that this is going to be a good method for growers to continue on to get better, higher yields. They just have to put more energy into pruning. But we did do an economic study of this whole situation, and we did make a profit on all these years except for that year in 2017. Okay, next we're going to walk into the grove, and we'll show you what we're going to be doing with pruning, and some of the fruit has been size picked already. They picked the 8-ounce fruit, but they've left a lot of the smaller fruit in here to size up. Okay, as you can see, we have not pruned this last year. And what happened is a lot of the lower branches got shaded and the leaves fell off. So we're gaining height here. We're eventually going to have all our fruit very high up in the tree. We want to keep it low because if we do that, we can all pick from the ground without ladders. You can see on the outside of the canopy, it's starting to go into flowering here. And so they need to be pruned. And let's just walk in here just a little bit farther. So we're going to be pruning on both sides here after we get things harvested. Like I said, we'd like to have this look like a fat Christmas tree, and in order to do that, we're going to have to start removing some branches. So I would probably go in here and pick a branch here, just remove the whole branch, and look around. Maybe I might take off 3 or 4 branches all the way down to the trunk. And in fact, in this particular case, we have 3 main scaffold branches coming out here. I might just take off one whole scaffold branch, and then we'll shorten the tree. And when that happens, you get a lot of, when the sun can hit the trunk, you get a lot of small new leaves, and that'll start to fill in this space here. Okay, let's walk down a little farther. So you can see how crowded it is in here. You can see some fruit on the trees over here. These are the smaller fruit. When they possibly grow a little bit bigger and the price comes up, the grower will come in here and strip pick. And then after that, like I said, we'll come in here and remove some main branches, shorten the height of the tree, and we'll eventually get this back into a fat Christmas tree shape. Okay, as I said earlier, we have 8 hass trees around a Zutano. And that's because we want a better cross-pollination than we usually get here. The question is, do we have too many Zutanos in this grove? And we don't know for sure, but we know for sure that when the hass flowers are female in the morning, the Zutanos will be male in the morning, and they'll the bees. We have a lot of bees out here also. Bees can very easily just hit the Zutano, hit the Hass, and then the Hass is pollinated. So, but one of the problems with Zutano, they grow very fast, they grow upright, and we need to keep the height down. This tree here was just about almost 14, 15 feet high, and we had to come in here earlier and top these trees a little bit. You can see this branch up here. They topped them right there, and they brought out about half the height of this tree. So that'll help with the shading of the neighboring Hass. We got to really keep these Zutanos down. All we want really are flowers. The Zutano fruit aren't worth very much, and a lot of times the packing houses won't take them. So, but we are increasing our pollination, and it really helped on our yield. Can I prove that? Not quite, because we don't have a block of pure Hass without the Zutanos. But eventually we'll probably be doing another trial very similar to this with just pure Hass and no Zutanos. I'd really like to try that out. Okay, behind me are quite a few beehives. They just came in from pollinating almonds up in Tulare County, and just in time for the avocado flowering. But one of the things I wanted to show you is we have a little pool of water here for them to get their water. And they put some water plants in here, so they don't have to go all the way down to the reservoir to get some water. I think that's an important thing to do when you've got beehives. Okay, we're in the lamb Hass side of the trial. It's the same situation. We have 8 lamb Hass around a Zutano, because lamb Hass are 8 flowers, Zutanos are bee flowers. This is an interesting tree. We had it here because we thought it might be more productive than our Hass, but it's less productive. Not too bad though. The leaves look a little different. They look like they're narrow, long. Actually, they're kind of funny. They kind of curl, and they look like they're wilting, but they're not wilting. It's just a different look to this tree. Now, lamb Hass will not be ready to harvest until May, June, July, sometimes into August. So they're later than Hass, and you don't want to pick them too early. But they also set fruit in clusters. I want to show you a cluster of lamb Hass down here. They get a lot of fruit in clusters, and sometimes the branches are too low and the fruit are touching the ground. You can't have the fruit touching the ground anymore because of food safety laws. So this is okay. Oops, Joe, I just pulled one off. This is okay, but if they're touching the ground, you're not allowed to harvest those. So I hope you've learned a little bit about our trial today, and it's being very productive. We're just going to have to get in here in a little while and do some heavy pruning. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Gary Bender, are you out there?
I am here.
So a question has come in. Now that you know a 10 by 10 requires some pruning, would you do it again? And what spacing would you use for Hass? And would you use a different spacing for lamb Hass? And could you forecast into what would you use for spacing for gem?
Those are very good questions. 10 by 10, we set that up because they were doing a lot of work down in Chile on a 3 meter by 3 meter spacing, which is about 10 by 10. And we had to choose one. We didn't have enough. I would really have liked to have had a larger trial with different spacings, and that is actually going to be going on up in Ventura with Sonia Rios and you've been, I think. So they're going to be taking a look at some different spacings. But in our case, we had grant money from CAC, and that's about all we could afford to do. I was mainly looking at the 10 by 10, and I wanted to keep it down to 8 feet. And so we could pick without ladders, and we were able to do that very well. And the pickers loved it. They could really get through there fast, and they're being paid piece rate, but that last year I had a couple broken toes and had to have a joint replacement in my toe and baloney like that, and I couldn't prune, and so the Staley, now I offered to the Staley Ranch if they wanted to go ahead and remove every other tree because things are getting crowded. And they said no, they want Gary Bender to go back in there and prune it when he can move. And so that's what's going to happen next year.
Okay, here's another question.
Well, wait a minute here, Ben. What about the gems? Now, you guys grow more gems up there in Ventura. What spacing do you think they should be on?
Holy moly, that is what I'm going to go out and look at some gem planting on Friday that's planted on a 6x13. And, you know, I personally think that is an awfully tight spacing even for gem. You know, gem is an upright tree, and it's a precocious tree. It's a heavy producer. And as long as it stays that way, you can kind of stay on top of the pruning. But, you know, if we get a freeze and we get a heat spell, you drop the fruit and you unleash that tree, you know, it no longer has the restrictions that, you know, fruit has on the tree. You know, the tree puts a lot of energy into fruit. And when it's doing that, it's not putting it into vegetative growth. Anyway, when you remove the fruit and it's not harnessed, it can grow pretty darn fast. So, you know, this is all supposition at this point, of course. You know, I would think, you know, a 10 by 14 might work with gem, but boy, it's still going to be tight, and you're going to be doing some pruning. Tim Spann did a really interesting review of a trial with Hass out at Pine Tree. That was summarized in the summer or spring in the Grove from the Avocado Commission. And basically the tighter spacings are very difficult with Hass.
Yeah, I agree. I think 10 is about as close as you could get. I've seen some of the 6-foot spacings, and boy, they looked way too crowded to me. And then one of the big plantings down in Palma Valley, they are removing some of those trees out of there.
Yeah, and you know, and as long as you have that as your plan, you know, it's phenomenal the amount of fruit you can haul off the, you know, even a 1-year-old planting, but 2, 3, 4-year-old planting. And so maybe you want to get a whole bunch of money the first couple of years to pay off your mafia bosses and so on. But you got to be ready to remove trees at some point.
Yeah.
You know, the labor associated with pruning, you know, twice a year is, you know, I've seen so many higher density plantings where, you know, people go, oh, I'll let it go another, and boy, you let it go another year, and then you
can't do that.
No. You cannot play catch up with this.
No.
You know, you cut it out and you're out of production for 2 years. So, you know, if you are a tough type and you are going to stick to your plan, yeah, maybe it'll work, but most people aren't, you know, tough. So another question, I've got to ask this question. What about the time of pruning? You know, you're pruning in September, October, you know, lamb Hass, you want to get the fruit up. What if you did it in the spring so that you had the opportunity to, you know, put on new growth so it would set fruit, or the flowers would form later on in August, September, and would set more fruit in the spring. So timing of pruning, can you address that?
You know, that's a really hard one with the lamb Hass.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure quite what to do, but we found out in our grove, we were not getting the growth in the lamb Hass that we were in the Hass. They were putting more energy into fruit, it seemed like. But then we had a high drop rate in the lamb Hass, which is typical of young lamb Hass. So yeah, that's a tough one. Now the lamb Hass would throw out branches into the next tree, and our policy was we just wanted to be able to walk around the tree without being slapped in the face with a branch. So we were removing those branches, but for height, not too bad. But I honestly am not sure about that question. Now in the Hass, the problem with Hass, of course, is they always have fruit on them, little fruit, big fruit, flowers, or something going on. When do you do it? I think the best time would be to, like I said in the video, we harvested early. We tried to harvest early, except for all this little fruit. And then we immediately went into heavy pruning because flowers were forming. And we found out when we got our pruning done, we still had enough flowers to set a good crop. Now, Leo McGuire told me one time, said, Gary, you can't have the entire industry pruning in March or in harvesting in March, I mean, and he's right. So, yeah, it's a tough one, and I just don't know quite how to answer those questions.
Well, something to remember as well is that this industry is spread out over a distance of about 300 miles. And San Diego should not be the practices that one does in Morro Bay or even in Santa Cruz.
Exactly, yes.
And so working off of a calendar is kind of like working off an irrigation calendar. It doesn't work. You got to do it according to your environment. And so our industry has moved north. You know, a lot of the plantings that are occurring, the new plantings are in Ventura, Santa Barbara, to a certain extent in San Luis Obispo. And so, you know, the systems are going to have to be worked out for these different environments as well.
Sure. And you can also do a couple different pickings, harvestings, do the outside fruit first and then prune, and then let the inside fruits stay later on, maybe into the early summer or something like that.
Yeah. So another question that's come up, what do you do when you've dropped your fruit? We've had a heat spell, you've had a freeze, you know, we didn't have the right weather for good fruit set in the spring, you don't have a crop on. When is the ideal time to prune when you don't have fruit?
Well,
you don't have
I wanted to say something along that line a little bit here. We have in these high densities, you have a tight canopy, and you don't have a lot of wind drawing water out of the trees up high in the 20-foot trees. I mean, you're losing a lot of water in a wind, so in a heat spell. So we had a tight, close canopy, and I walked in there in the middle of one of those heat spells when it was 117 degrees out there, and it felt like a rainforest down Central America. And we had a lot of water coming up. Staleys are very good at irrigating, and they kept everything moist out there. And we had no damage in our high density at all, except for the edge trees. And the regular Staley groves with the big trees, they had tremendous heat damage. And it was just like night and day. So that's one advantage of this thing. I forgot the rest of your question, Ben.
Well, if you don't have the issue of fruit, if you had no fruit on the tree because of various problems, you know, lack of good weather, heat damage, something like that, what would be the best time to prune?
Well, I still think in the spring, because you're going to be developing fruiting wood during the summer. And Carol Lovett did a lot of research with that, and she said a lot of the flowers in the following spring come from those summer flushes. And that was one of the mistakes some of our growers were making. They were doing a lot of pruning, a lot of heavy pruning in the summer, cutting off a lot of fruiting wood.
Yeah, that's the ideal time in the spring. Questions that are coming up. You have an offer for a pruning trial in GEM in North San Diego County, if you're willing to do that. How many times did you prune in lamb and in Hass? Did you do it once a year or twice a year?
We did about we did fairly heavy pruning in the spring after we harvested. And then I think it was, we came back in there in, I think late June or July, early July, just to clear the aisles, to get the branches out of the aisles. And we did the same thing in September, late September. And that was just so we could move around in there. So those later prunings were very light prunings. We went through there pretty quick. The heavy prunings, of course, took a while. especially when you're an old man like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're methodical and you're good. So instead of planting on a square, would you plant on a diamond shape?
That's probably a good idea. Some people are doing that. I think that probably works okay.
And for the last question, would you choose DUSA or VC207, or would you choose a different rootstock?
If I had a salt problem, fairly salty water, I would do the VC207. The DUSA, we've had in several trials, and it works really good in San Diego. I know you've had some problems in Ventura, but I haven't seen any problems with DUSA. And it has pretty good Phytophthora resistance. It's not immune, but it does have pretty good resistance, and I think it's got some salt tolerance.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next presentation. We're going to have a question and answer at the very end of all these presentations, but we're going to move on now to discussion of avocado lace bug with Jim Davis.
Hi, my name is Jim Davis with Entomological Services Incorporated. I'm here today to talk about the avocado lace bug. I'm going to tell you a little bit about its history, the biology of the pest insect, and also control measures that can be used to keep it in check. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what we can do in the future to help make sure that we keep this pest under control and don't suffer any economic loss due to it. When I first saw this pest, or heard about this pest, it was in 2004 when the pest came into the South County. At that time, the commission decided not to take any actions about the pest except to simply keep an eye on it. And indeed, the pest has never spread out of that area. In 2017, the pest was found in the Bonsall area around the 76 and 15 intersection in North San Diego County. And since then, it has been spreading out from that area, covering quite a large area of the North County and spread into southern Riverside County as well. I first noticed damage symptoms from this pest this year during the heat wave when I saw an excessive amount of leaves, green leaves, on the ground, as in this picture. From this, you can see that the trees have been starting to defoliate, I think as a result of stress by the pest and the high heat, which caused the trees to begin the defoliation. Usually, when you see this pest, these are the first damage symptoms you see. A dead spot in the middle of the blade with yellow stippling around the spot, which is feeding damage from the pest. If you turn the leaf over, you see the adults and the eggs on the underside of the leaf, and often you'll see the immature stages. There are 5 immature stages before becoming an adult. All of them are passed on the leaf except for the last stage, which is spent in the leaf duff. The pest will usually go egg to adult in about 3 weeks during warm conditions, but in the winter, they can live for several months and generally overwinter as an adult, where egg laying is common, but at a slow rate, and most of the eggs fail to hatch, though some do, and it does go through the generation, but really it doesn't pick up until the spring when the pest begins to grow in numbers and spread to other trees. In order to control this pest, we've tried various pesticides. In 2005, after this infestation in the South County, Dr. Joe Morris at UC Riverside did a pesticide trial to find out if any of the common pesticides we had would be effective against the pest. And here are the results of that trial. So you can see that only really the harshest pesticides had long-term control of the pest, and our more mild pesticides, which include spinosad and abamectin, were relatively effective, but did not reduce the population to the low levels of the stronger pesticides. So we currently have 4 materials that look good. I personally have used Savanto and Danitol, which were extremely effective, as well as I've heard of, or I've seen a grove in which Delegate was used, and that was very effective in controlling the pest. One of the other PCAs in the county, Matt Hand, has told me he's had good results with Admire Pro applied foliarly. And I think that that's another good tool in our toolbox. So we have 4 pretty good pesticides on the conventional side for avocados. But on the organic side, we don't really have a great standout product. A number of growers have tried Pyganic without success. We're starting now with combinations of materials. I heard again from Matt Hand that the use of Entrust was relatively successful with over 50% mortality, and the same with a pure oil application where we used a heavy amount of oil as a contact insecticide. So I think we still have work to do on the organic side, but I think conventionally we're in pretty good shape. What can we do in the future to try to make sure that this pest doesn't keep causing us problems? Well, really we need to do research on the whole biology, the interaction of the pest and the plant, and what things we can measure to make sure that we understand when the pest is likely to cause damage, and we can take action at that time to prevent the damage. So we need to understand the interaction of the plant and the pest. We need to understand a monitoring technique, what we need to measure and how often, as well as when we can anticipate that damage is going to take place so that we can put the action in to prevent that damage from occurring. Because the defoliation of the tree leads to sunburned fruit, and we can't lose the crop to that. So we have to keep the leaves on the tree. So this may include using a little additional nitrogen at that time to try to keep the fall flush increasing and keeping that fruit covered so that it doesn't get sunburned. I think there are things we can do with trying to find out currently what's happening in the field, what the nature of the pest is and how quickly it spreads, so that we can get a handle on this and really understand what we need to do to keep this pest in check and keep growing our avocados profitably. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions, you can call me or send me an email, and I'd be happy to discuss this with you and try to find out what your situation is and what we can all do to keep this pest under control. Thank you very much.
So Jim, are you there? Jim Davis.
Sorry about that. I had to get my mute off.
So in an organic situation, what are your best options? You mentioned Pyganic, but how effective is it?
Well, it is more effective, and all the pesticides really are more effective by ground than by air. But the cost, especially down here for ground applications, is really high because the trees are big and it's difficult to get on these steep slopes. So mostly we do applications aerially by helicopter. And I've used Pyganic, and it gives some control where the application is, where the contact is good. In other words, if your trees are small, you've recently stumped them, or you have good spacing between the trees so the prop wash can move the material down, you get good control. Like in the tops of the trees, good control. But in the lower canopy, especially when it's already, the canopy's already solid across the top, you don't get a lot of control down in the lower portions. But having said that, if we can keep the upper part of the canopy free, relatively free of the pest, then at least we can keep the leaves on the tree and the fruit covered so it won't sunburn, even if the pest is still active in the lower part. But I think really we have quite a number of options organically, but I think we really need to do some trials of with combinations of materials to see if we can find a mix that will give us fairly long-lasting control for the organic growers.
So you mentioned using nitrogen fertilization to stay ahead of it. Are there other cultural operations one can do to kind of mitigate the problem and possibly avoid doing a pesticide application?
Well, right now I don't know if we have any good cultural things that we could do. The pest prefers the older leaves, so if you do some pruning and open the trees up a little bit, that might help because it allows air movement as well as natural enemies to come in. We haven't really seen much effect from natural enemies, and we're not really expecting to get a lot. There are a couple of egg parasites that attack lace bugs, but they've never been shown to provide adequate control. So we're really looking at some type of chemical control. We're probably going to see if we can do something in the spring application with the thrips that might reduce the number of lace bugs from that overwintering population so that they don't have a chance to build up to high levels in the summer. But again, we have a lot to learn about this pest because until now we haven't paid a lot of attention to it because it hasn't really caused any problem. But this year when that excessive heat came on, some of these groves started defoliating, ones that had high percentages of the leaves that were infested. Generally, I'd say that the groves that I had to treat had infestation rates on the old leaves of over 50% of the older leaves had live lace bugs on them. So most of the other groves that I'm looking at, they're more like 5%, 10%, maybe even 20%. But I didn't really see the damage until we got into that higher percentage. So I think that, as I mentioned in the talk, trying to figure out what we're going to try to measure to anticipate the damage is going to be critical.
Yeah. So what about a late winter pre-blooms? Well, what is pre-bloom? Anyway, a late winter when you're actually applying mainly to hardened off leaves, old leaves, would that be one of the best ways to deal with it?
Well, I think that's going to be an option. What we need to look at is, what's the timing on that, and what are the products that we want to use. We do have to have some concern about if we start using the stronger insecticides, about resistance in that population. As I mentioned, we have several, so we can do some rotation. Maybe we can just use oil for that late fall application, just as a contact to reduce the numbers, so we don't have so much going into the overwintering. So I think that really we have a lot of opportunities to get this pest down to a level where it's not going to have a chance to grow to damaging levels, but we need to understand how to fit this, how to integrate those measures into our existing program in a way that won't disrupt what we're trying to do in other areas, but also to give economic control so that we can try our best to remain profitable in the challenging this challenging environment.
Yeah. So with thrips feeding off of avocado thrips feeding off of tissue and the lace bug off of old tissues, can you see any way of combining treatments that would deal with both those pests?
Well, I think that most of the materials we have for thrips control are going to provide some control of the lace bug. Mm-hmm. But the question is, which ones are most effective, and what indicators are there in your grove in the spring that maybe using a different pesticide, one that is more active on the avocado lace bug, would be justified in order to prevent future damage. So again, I think this is part of the research that we need to do to try to understand how to make an integrated program that, as you're suggesting, solves two problems at once. We reduce thrips numbers and also reduce the avocado lace bug. And an issue there is at least in San Diego County, the thrips are becoming less and less threatening. In the last 2 years, I haven't treated hardly any groves for the thrips. So if you're not treating for the thrips, then you're not putting in your one that's going to get the thrips and the lace bug. And in fact, sometimes the lace bug may be the driver. You may say, well, I don't really have much thrips, but I have a significant lace bug population I'd like to reduce before the warm weather comes. And so that drives the pesticide application decision, and it just at the same time reduces thrips numbers.
One of the things every year it seems like something's different. in avocados and citrus.
No doubt.
This year, I've seen this new leaf roller, leaf miner. It's the same insect. It's causing different symptoms. I've seen scales. I've never seen scale before in avocados to any great extent. I've seen this avocado weevil. How much variation is there from year to year would you expect to see in avocados?
Well, I'd say in general, they're relatively consistent in terms of the pest populations, but they are heavily influenced by weather conditions. And I think especially heat waves like the one we went through this year really alter the insect ecology on the leaves. You not only have to look at what's the impact on the pest, but what are the impact on the predators and parasites, the thing that keep those pests in check all year long. And so you're going to have a differential effect on that complex. So I think that when you have an event like that, you really have to be vigilant to see if you're going to get some type of pest resurge that you hadn't expected before. Regarding some of these pests that are very infrequent, and you mentioned specifically one that we're seeing this year, which me and my partner are calling the Avocado Tip Roller, is a little caterpillar that mines the leaf in its first couple instars, and then it emerges out of the mine and rolls the tip of the leaf under to make a little protective place for it to live, and feeds on that. And this happens on the brand new leaf tissue, the newly forming red leaf tissue. And then after is caused the rolling on the tip, then the larvae emerges and feeds on the leaf. And you'll see as the leaves expand, you'll see leaves that have holes inside the margin, usually along one edge of the leaf, as a typical symptom of that, the presence of that pest. I don't think that it's really going to become a pest worthy of treatment, since it doesn't attack the fruit directly. It only attacks the leaves. And I think really the only danger that the pest may pose is in heavy numbers. It could roll enough leaves that it leaves some fruit exposed to sunburn. But I think that the pest is probably going to be easily controlled if we do have to control it, because we have a number of good materials that are good against caterpillars. But at this time, I think that's probably not one they're going to have to worry about. The scale insect seems to come and go, kind of independent of weather or anything else. Sometimes I find it a little bit and sometimes not, but down here, usually we don't have too much problem with that. And so far, I haven't seen any problems with the weevil, but again, that could be something that becomes a treatment pest, especially if we're looking to export avocados.
Yeah. So a question just came in. Where do I get beneficial insects, predators and pests? Do I need to release them? Who do I go to get them?
Right. Well, it really depends mostly on the type of insect you're looking for. The only insect that we make sort of calendar or program releases for is the omnivorous looper and amorbia. We typically try to put some Trichogramma platneri out in groves, even in small numbers, just to try to establish them there on the population of those caterpillars and to keep them thriving in the area. We have used the lacewing for control of the avocado thrips at a rate of about 10,000 per acre every other week, from flowering until the fruit is out of danger. And there are a number of insectaries around. There's a Rincon Vitova there in Ventura, beneficial insectary up by Sacramento, FAR in Corona. So there's a number of insectaries that you can contact to get help with that type of program, or you can talk to your PCA and they can set up the program. So it really depends on your situation, but there's a lot of resources out there that you can tap into and a lot of knowledge. that you can get, especially by going to meetings like this and talking to other growers and the presenters at the meetings.
Yeah. So what pests do you see on the horizon? What do people need to be looking out for?
Well, it really, since the avocados evolved in Mexico, Guatemala, and the Caribbean, those are the places where we look for what are the pests and what are the beneficials that attack them. And I think, doing some survey work there, like Mark Hoddle has done, has been very valuable. And the ones I'm most concerned about are the seed weevil and some of the moths that bore into the seed that really make the fruit ugly and would be cause a much different way that we would have to pack our fruit to make sure that the consumer didn't see that those ruined fruit. So those are the ones I'm most concerned about. And so far, the phytosanitary regulations that are in place have kept those ones out. But there's a lot of illegal movement of, well, not a lot, but there is illegal movement of fruit and plant material across the borders. And so we just have to be vigilant. And I think that if one of those pests came in, it would probably be beneficial to try an eradication program if the area infested is not too large.
Yeah. So here's the where the rubber hits the road. What does it cost to work with an independent pest control advisor? Or rather, what does it cost not to work with a pest control advisor?
Right. Well, the way I see it is that you have a lot of risks as a farmer. You have weather risk, you have market risk, you have supply chain risk. There are risks that you face, and one of those risks is from pest damage. And so basically by hiring a pest control advisor, you put a member on your team who specializes in managing that risk for you and helping you make the decisions on how to mitigate that risk most economically and effectively for your growth. So what you get is somebody who understands the cropping system and how to apply the pesticides only when needed and using the correct one with the correct timing. So if you decide not to use a pest control advisor, then you have to educate yourself about the pests, the pesticides that are most effective against them, and the timing, and then do the scouting and information gathering yourself, so that you can make those decisions. I should mention the cost, since you did ask about that. Generally, it's somewhere between $3 and $4 per acre per month, depending on the size of your grove and other factors, which company you hire. And of all the people I know that are in this business as PCAs, I trust them all. I don't think there's any people now that I would advise anybody against hiring anybody that has 5 or 10 years experience with avocados, who has been trained as a pest control advisor, understands what's available and how to monitor for it. So I think you can hire just about anybody with confidence.
Yeah, certainly somebody who's new to avocados really does need to tap into as many information sources as possible. And PCAs are people that know the systems that are in that environment, and they really are very helpful.
Yes, and most of the pest control advisors now are also certified crop advisors, which means they can also advise you on fertilizer choice and use and timing.
Yeah. So with that, we're moving on to the Oliver Atkins Award that is going to be presented by Wayne Bryden. Take it, Wayne.
Hi, my name is Wayne Bryden, and I'm a director on the California Avocado Society and chairman of the awards committee. And it's my pleasure now to present the Oliver Atkins Award for excellence in service to this year's recipient. And first of all, Oliver Atkins was a member of the Avocado Society from looks like 1950 till his death in 1996. And at that point, the board of directors of the Avocado Society determined that a second award needed to be given in honor of Oliver Atkins for all his service to this industry through the Avocado Society. As a nurseryman in Fallbrook, he was a legendary figure through those years, past president of the Avocado Society. He has also served on the Production Research Committee through CAC and the Varieties Committee at the Avocado Society, and then most importantly, the Nurserymen's Subcommittee, which was formed to bring the standards of all avocado nurserymen up to a phytosanitary level that would create healthy nursery trees for our industry. His honor is given because of the time and energy for the betterment of the industry. And that is certainly applies to our recipient this year. He comes to us from Ohio, from Oberlin College, and then went on to UC Riverside to get a master's degree in agricultural pest management. He's been involved in American Insectaries, creating beneficial insects through the IPM program, and now is a PCA in the San Diego County, Riverside County area. His strength is not only in the field, but he brings people together. A number of years ago, we had a problem that the Ag Commissioner needed a B statement from the industry. Our recipient brought together, through Guy Whitney and the Avocado Commission, brought together all the PCAs, beekeepers, the Ag Commissioner's office itself, created a B statement that was sent and accepted by the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, and allowed us to go ahead under the B labels to spray our pesticides, especially Agromec. And this, now we have the new problem with the Avocado Lace Bug, and our recipient has done the same thing. He wants to bring together people through the Production Research Committee, through the industry, to tackle this. Our recipient has, again, reached out, will bring together the industry through the Production Research Committee, through the field, through farm managers and growers, and will bring together all the talent to control this bug. He has been a member of the Production Research Committee at California Avocado for many years, director at the Avocado Society. And so it's my pleasure at this time to present the Oliver Atkins Award to Mr. Jim Davis of Escondido.
Well, thank you, Wayne. I really appreciate that. I'd also like to thank the California Avocado Society and the Board of Directors for bestowing this award on me. It's really an honor to be chosen among the group of people who have been honored like this in the past. When you read that list, you just see some of the most amazing people in the industry. My personal belief is that the more that we learn and share and grow as an industry and cooperate with each other, the better off we're going to be. We need to do research and to understand the technical nature of the crop that we're growing. And I think that the actions of the Avocado Society to bring the research of UCR to the fore has really benefited us all. So thank you very much for this award. I really appreciate it, and I feel very honored. Thank you.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is the end of our formal presentation, but we also have time to, generate some more questions if any are out there. One that came through for Gary Bender is, do you have a sense of the economics of pruning different densities? What does it cost to maintain a high density, or what does it cost to maintain different densities?
Oh, well, that's a good question. And we kept track of that. I don't have the data right here in front of me. There was an article. I did write an article for the Grove magazine, and let's see, that is it was late last year. I'm not sure what month that was, but it covered the high density trial we did, but the economic part was not in that. And yeah, it's I'm afraid we had a little bit of trouble with that. We kept track of our picking and our pruning, and but we very rarely had any professional pickers out there or harvesters. We had people on the ranch, and we had kids involved and everything. They did a pretty good job, but professionals would do a lot faster. So that kind of stuff is not really very reliable. But I did keep track of. We looked at the yield we brought in. We looked at the cost of irrigation, and we looked at the cost of the harvesting and the pruning. And like I said in this article, we made a profit in 3 out of 4 years. The one we did not was when we went into alternate bearing, and we only had a little over 5,000 pounds per acre, which was actually not much more than the California average yield. But when we were way above the California average yield, we were making profit.
Yeah. Here's a question for both you and Jim Davis, and maybe John Burr if he's still around. What are the advantages of using mulch in an avocado orchard?
Well, I don't know who wants to do this. I love mulch. I mean, I love it. It provides nutrients, especially the large wood chips. And when they break down, they provide a little bit of Phytophthora resistance, and that was some research done by some graduate students in Dr. Menge's lab. But the issue, especially in San Diego, is getting the mulch under the trees, because we're on these slopes and we can't get tractors in there. So I've seen it done up in Ventura where side dump trailers could go through and apply the mulch fairly easily. But Jim Davis, I don't know what you think about that, but if you can get it on the trees, it's great.
Yeah, I think that the mulch is really very beneficial for the orchards. The avocados like the mulch. They use their own leaves to make mulch, basically. But the problem in California is that the soils are have so little organic matter in them that adding the mulch really improves the organic matter in the soil. You can either buy compost. We should make this distinction. What you're putting down. Most people, when they talk about mulch, are talking about chipped wood or green waste or something like that. The particles are pretty large, but you can also compost that green waste. And the compost is really rich with microorganisms, and especially a lot that are antagonistic to the root rot fungus. But either way, when you put either the chips on or compost, that material eventually breaks down and moves down into the soil. It increases the soil organic matter, which increases the water holding capacity and ion exchange capacity or fertility of the soil. So you just get a host of benefits by doing it. Unfortunately, we don't have any real long-term studies that tell us what the economic impact is, but just from observing growers that have put on the mulch compared to those that don't, I think that they really get better. I think of it as more like stability, like the trees. When the hot weather comes, they don't seem to suffer as much from evaporative loss. You don't see as much tip burn or other leaf burn symptoms, and they tend to not be quite as alternate bearing. Although I don't know if that would really be proved out in a long-term study, but they just seem to be more healthy all around and able to retain their leaves and maintain a good canopy despite wind and heat and other conditions which cause leaves to be stripped off or burned.
One of the comments that's come through is that in the wintertime, mulch can actually cause a cooler environment because it insulates the soil from the sun warming the soil. How does one address cooling in an environment that is getting warmer and warmer. Are there ways to make sure that we don't get so much heat damage? What techniques could we use to reduce damage to trees from heat spells?
Well, I just the only thing I've ever seen anybody try to do was out at one of the large farms that I'd worked on. They put sprinklers about 10 feet up off the ground and in between the trees. And in the afternoon, when the temperature would get warm, they would just turn on the sprinklers for 15 minutes or so every hour or two to try to reduce the in-grove temperature and increase the humidity. And the idea being that they wanted to try to keep the trees, the stomates of the trees open so that they could do gas exchange and therefore produce sugars, and not close the stomates, which the avocados will do when the temperatures get warm, which shuts down carbohydrate production. So, but I did notice that after the year where they did that, the next year they stopped doing it. So I think that they didn't really see enough yield gain to justify the water cost. But the grower, wasn't really sharing his data with me on that, so I don't really know what drove them to end that. But that would be that's the only thing I've ever seen. Although I have heard of companies that make products that supposedly will protect the leaves from evapotranspiration loss. In other words, they sort of like thicken the waxy layer, sort of, or they put on an additional layer to try to reduce the evaporation of water from the trees.
Yeah, we've done some work on that with these various materials that put on like a thick wax, like you said, but it blocked the stomates, and our leaves burned up because they just couldn't cool themselves. Also, word of caution on putting a sprinkler up into a tree for a long period of time is it'll leave salt behind. We have a lot of salt in our water, and we saw this in a small cherimoya grove in Fallbrook where he was trying to keep things moist for set the flowers better, he thought, keep the humidity up. And it seemed to work, but he put so much salt up there, he lost most of his leaves. It was just strict salt damage.
Just a comment here, Index Fresh is going to be putting on a seminar next week on how to manage heat spells and how to improve cooling. So you might tune in on that. Question, is gem avocado susceptible to cooler climates, to warmer climates? How does it fit in relative to Hass to heat and cold? Any comments? Anyone? No one comments. Okay.
Ben, I just wanted to say one more thing about the cooling, if I could. And that is probably the best plan I've seen when you're expecting excessive heat like we've had, is to try to get the trees as full of water as you can before the heat comes. In other words, if you know that it's going to be hot the next day, say that day is going to be Friday, they're expecting heat. On Wednesday or Thursday, try to, even if you've irrigated before already, try to get some extra water on those trees so they can load it up into themselves before the heat comes. Because I've seen, even if the irrigation system is on, the trees cannot absorb the water fast enough to prevent the leaf burn with a really severe Santa Ana. So the groves that I've seen that have done the best are the people that try to get the water into the tree before the heat wave comes.
Yeah, that's really an important point, because trees actually will shut down their stomata when it starts getting hot, and then they don't transpire and they don't cool themselves off. They don't radiate the heat.
Ben, Leo here. I'll jump in on that question about the gems. Dan Grant and I had a long discussion about what's going on in Temecula with all the damage. And he feels that the groves he's seeing in heat areas, the gem does handle the heat better. I was kind of hoping Nathan would jump on because he knows a lot more about gems than I do. But there is a grove in Temecula. It is young. It appears very little damage compared to the house trees that are around it. So hopefully the smaller tree can translocate water better. We still have a lot to learn about gems in the South.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions that's come in is, does it need more heat than Hass along the coast where it's kind of cool? Today, in the last 3 days, it's been foggy. Where's the sun? I haven't seen it in 3 days. No comment.
Well, if you look at where Hass come from in Mexico, generally in the summer in the major growing area there, they are it's cloudy and cool during the summer.
Yeah.
And all the avocado pests seem to be very susceptible to high temperatures. So to me, that indicates that the avocados like cool conditions, and I don't think the overcast really hurts them that much, because also they close their stomata at a very low temperature, so relatively low. So it looks to me like they're really more adapted to that kind of cool and overcast condition than they are to the extremely sunny conditions that we usually have here.
Yeah, that. Does gem need more sun than Hass, do you think?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in general, gem is just a higher demand tree. Seems to hold, from what I've seen, it can hold up just as well as Hass in cold or hot temperatures, but it has a higher demand for water. So it can, if you don't get the water on them in time, I've seen gem that look a lot worse than Hass.
Points made here that gem has more fruit on the inside. It's better covered, so there's less sunburn. Has that been one's experience, Nathan?
Yeah. It hangs the fruit on the inside, but still thinking about the overall tree and the water demand, I think gem is the roots are sucking harder, and they're demanding a lot more water than a traditional Hass tree.
Yeah. Okay. Comment, anti-stress 550 or 2000 has been used to reduce sunburn damage on avocados. Gary, did you use anti-stress in your studies?
I believe we did. It was done quite a long time ago. I think that was one of them.
Any comments?
Well, we tried several products, and they were all touted to reduce heat damage and actually they were touted to reduce water use. You plug up the stomates, water can't escape the tree, right? So
yeah.
And the grower we were working with, after we sprayed everything, and it went a few days through the summer, and we started dropping a lot of leaves because the leaves could not cool down. Our controls worked out fine, but all the other products we used didn't work, basically. And the grower was kind of upset with me. So one of those things.
Yeah.
Take your chances.
Yeah.
Is there any work being done on robots for harvesting, pruning, spraying that you're aware of in avocado? I know they've done a lot in citrus.
Great question. What's the answer, Ben?
I'm not aware of it. Some work was being done on harvest. A whole lot of work was done about 30 years ago, where they used llamas and mules and overhead carriers, and it turns out human beings did it better than
we tried llamas.
Yeah.
And we didn't know. We put like the pickers came up to the llama, and the llama had a basket on each side of its back, I guess, and the picker loaded one side and threw the llama's balance off, and he went in circles They're crazy. So we found out you have to load both sides at exactly the same time. But the llama was really good at climbing up a hill quickly, much faster than the guys doing it.
Well, I know that one of my growers had asked me about possibly using a fairly sizable drone to make pesticide applications on his grove. And as I was perusing the Department of Pesticide Regulations website for another issue, I came across a certification program for people who plan to do that. If you want to use a drone to apply pesticides, then you have to be certified like a pilot to be able to make that application. So I think that, you know, as that technology progresses and people get experience with it, and you know, we build better equipment, it might be possible that people could use drones or some type of thing like that to apply pesticides, and also possibly for people in my profession that we might be able to scout the trees, especially the upper part of the canopy where we don't get much information usually, to find out more about what's going on with the crop.
Yeah.
Of course, there's also, I should also point out that with the drone you can do remote sensing, and there's been a lot of advance in that technology to try to show heat stress or nutrient deficiencies in crops from, by going overhead and photographing different or observing different wavelengths of light to see differences in the crop. And so I think that technology also may really develop into another monitoring tool.
Yeah, that's being used extensively right now in the Central Valley and citrus, along with other crops. Question coming in, what's the potential problem with viral diseases on trees spreading wood chips, especially after rain?
I'd say the potential is very low. Because generally viruses only move from living tissue to living tissue. They're in plants anyway. They're not particularly good at moving in now. So typically we move them by pruning with, you can move them on pruning equipment or by wounds in the plant. But I don't think there's a lot of chance of that in chip wood to bring in viruses. And the main one we're concerned about is sunblotch. And so
I agree with that on the virus, Jim. But we had a grove in Palma Valley where they were bringing in fresh chipped plant material and wood material from Los Angeles, and it was not composted. And they put a lot under the trees. And we started developing a lot of Botrysphaera cankers in the trees. So you know, I'm a little nervous about putting non-composted materials out.
Right. What about? Well, I agree that you do have the risk of these basically wood decaying fungi like Botrysphaera, and you know, the commission has been looking at a lot of doing extensive research now to see how extensive that infestation or the infestations of Botrysphaera is throughout the avocado growing area, in anticipation of trying to figure out if there are control measures we can use. And so, of course, one of the main principles to reduce the infestation is to reduce the inoculum, or the amount of spores that are available, which generally occur on branches that get sunburned or for some other reason have a little dieback, and then the fungus infects those branches, and then the spores eventually form and spread out into the grove. So putting more spores into the grove by putting in wood chips certainly wouldn't help that issue. But at the moment, you know, we know that we're getting some loss, but we haven't really been able to quantify how important that problem is, and if it's important enough that we need to institute control measures.
Yeah. And, you know, an avocado really is a hotbed of Botryosphaera already with all the leaves that are out there. Question that's come in. When does one prune out sunburn damaged branches? What's the best time to do it?
Well, I'd have to go with the spring, like the regular pruning, because that in that time generally, well, you're near the end of the rainy season, so as long as the pruning wound remains dry, generally it'll heal okay. Although you can put a fungicide onto the cut end to try to prevent any infestation, but the main scientist that's been looking at that says that he doesn't recommend using any fungicide on the pruning wound and just let the plant naturally heal over.
They heal pretty quick. I had a tree here at my home. We went on vacation, came back, and it didn't get enough water, and then we had a lot of heat damage. All of these are brown. I didn't want to take the leaves off because that's the only shade the branches had, so left them on. And I've got a lot of new growth coming out now. It looks real good. But I'm coming into the maybe the frost season here. That's maybe not so good. But anyway, I know a lot of people try to get out there and take all the brown leaves off. I don't know. What do you think about that, Ben?
Well, I think the leaves are protective of the tree.
Yeah.
As long as they're there, leave them there. And then, and I think Jim's idea of, go through the winter, and then the first time you prune, and this comes back to the time of pruning. The earlier you can prune, the better the tree's going to be. You want to get that fruit off. You don't want to have two crops on there. Harvest your fruit in January, get it off in an ideal world, and then prune, and then you can cut out the sunburn tissue. Now, I'm not suggesting you do that, but ideally that's what you do.
Right. Well, most growers like pruning in the spring also, because that way they can, any fruit that's on the branches they prune can be harvested and sold before the cut.
Okay. That's all, folks. We're not getting any more questions coming in. I don't know if I can call it, but this has been the 105th annual Avocado Society meeting, and it is close to 11 o'clock, and it's officially over. Okay.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks very much for your moderating, and thank you, Leo, for setting the whole thing up and all their hard work, and all the directors that worked on putting this together.
Yeah, nice job, Leo.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate the board. This has been a team effort, and I appreciate everything you guys have been done for the group. So thank you. And Ben, you're wonderful. We'll talk soon. And remember, everyone, go to our website, the one that says .org, and we're going to keep the society viable and changing every year. So you guys have a great afternoon, and thank you for attending today.